"Don't look at me like I'm a beggar," she said, her voice barely louder than the wind rattling the church doors. "I know what I am." I looked at her anyway. I looked at the dust on the hem of the gray dress that had once been blue. I looked at the way her fingers curled around a carpetbag so thin it could have been folded flat and slipped inside a Bible. I looked at the bruise she tried to hide beneath the collar, the one the color of a spent sunset. Redemption Falls, Wyoming Territory, in the fall of 1879, was not a town that welcomed strangers kindly. The wind came down off the bighorns carrying the smell of wood smoke and coming snow, and the men who gathered on the porch of Halloran's Mercantile watched every stagecoach the way wolves watch a wounded calf. She had stepped down from the noon coach with nothing. No trunk, no parasol, no family waiting, just that gray dress and a name she offered up like a coin she wasn't sure was real. "Eliza," she said. Eliza Grange. What she didn't know. What nobody in Redemption Falls knew. Not the preacher. Not the men on the porch. Not even the sheriff who'd already started walking toward her with that soft, dangerous smile of his. Was that the tall rancher standing across the street with his hat in his hands had been waiting 15 years for a woman to step off a stagecoach and say a name that wasn't hers. And when he heard her say it, he crossed the street. "My name is Silas Hollow, and until that afternoon I had believed the good Lord had forgotten where he put me. I owned 400 acres of hard grass and harder winters north of Redemption Falls, a herd of cattle that shrank a little every spring, and a house I had built with my own 2 hands for a woman who never came. 15 years earlier, I had ridden east to marry a girl named Ruth and Miller, and I had arrived at her father's farm 3 days after the fever took her. I buried her on a Tuesday and rode west on a Wednesday, and I hadn't spoken more than 10 words to a woman since, unless you counted ordering coffee at Miss Delphine's boarding house, which I did not. I had come into town that afternoon for nails and for coffee beans, and I had stopped on the boardwalk because a woman in a gray dress had stepped down from a stage, and something in the way she stood, like a candle in a wind she was too tired to fight, had turned me into a fence post. I watched Sheriff Cadale Vane cross toward her. I watched her see him, and I watched her flinch. A small flinch, the kind you'd miss if you weren't looking, the kind a woman learns when a man has taught her to. I put my hat on and I walked across the street. "Ma'am," I said, and I took the hat off again. "You look like you've come a long ways." She lifted her eyes to me, and I will tell you the truth. They were the color of river stone in shallow water, and they had been crying for so long they had forgotten how to stop. She tucked a stray curl of dark hair behind her ear with a hand that trembled and then went still, as if she had commanded it to. "I have," she said. "Where to?" She looked past me, toward the mountains. She looked past the mountains, toward something I could not see. "I don't rightly know, Mr." Sheriff Vane arrived beside us then, and the smile he wore was the smile a cat wears when it has cornered something small. "Silas," he said, tipping his hat to me the way a man tips his hat to a rival. "Didn't know you'd taken to greetin' the coach. Didn't know you had either, Cadale." His eyes went to the woman. "Mum, reckon I ought to know your business in my town." She opened her mouth, and I saw her search for a lie and fail to find one. And I saw her decide on the truth because the truth was all she had left. "I have nothing but this dress," she said. Her voice was steady, but her chin was not. "I have no husband. I have no kin here." I answered a letter that turned out not to be a letter at all, and I spent my last dollar on a coach ticket to a town I chose from a map because the name sounded like something the good Lord might do. Vane's smile grew. "Redemption, is it?" "Yes." "Well, ma'am, redemption ain't free in this town. There's laws about vagrants. There's laws about women alone. I don't know what came over me. I have thought about it every day since, and I still cannot say whether it was pity or fury or the ghost of Ruth and Miller reaching down out of heaven and putting the words in my mouth. I only know that I turned to that woman in the gray dress, and I said what I said. Then wear it down the aisle tonight. She looked at me. Vane looked at me. A wagon rolled past and the driver looked at me, too. I felt the words settling into the dust of the street like stones dropped into a still pond, and I felt them ripple outward, and I knew there was no calling them back. "Mr. She whispered, "I don't know you." "No, ma'am," I said. "You don't. Why would you?" "Because the sheriff of this town has a look about him I don't care for, and because you have been standing here for 5 minutes and no soul has offered you a cup of water." And because I have a house with a roof and a stove and a door that locks, and I have not had cause to lock it in 15 years. You may have my name, ma'am, or you may have my horse and directions to the next town. But you will not stand in this street 1 minute longer while that man decides what to do with you. She looked at me for a long time. She looked at my hands, which I have been told are honest hands. She looked at my boots, which were clean. She looked at my eyes, and whatever she saw there, she did not turn away from it. What is your name, mister? Silas Hollow. Silas, she said, as if she were tasting it. And then, softer, I have nothing to give you, Silas Hollow. I want you to know that before I say yes. I have nothing but this dress. Then wear it down the aisle tonight, I said again, and I offered her my arm. She took it. Preacher Ames married us at 6:30 that evening in a church that smelled of pine sap and kerosene. With 2 witnesses I paid $1 each and a bouquet of dried sage Miss Delphine pressed into Eliza's hands at the door. Eliza wore the gray dress. I wore my father's coat. When the preacher asked if I took this woman, I said I did. When he asked if she took this man, she paused so long I thought she might turn and run. And then she said, I do, in a voice so quiet only the good Lord and I could hear it. We rode north in the wagon under a sky the color of wet iron. She sat beside me and did not speak for an hour. When she finally did, she said, You must think I am a wicked woman. No, ma'am. You must think something. I think you are cold, and I think there is a blanket behind the seat, and I think when we get home I will build a fire and boil coffee, and you will sleep in the bed and I will sleep in the barn, and tomorrow we will decide what kind of arrangement we have made. She was quiet again. Then she reached behind the seat and pulled the blanket around herself, and I felt her shoulder brush mine, and she did not pull away and I did not move. But she had not told me about the letter in her pocket. And I had not told her that 15 years ago I had sworn on Ruth and Miller's grave I would never take another wife. The house I had built stood on a rise above a creek the Shoshone called Little Voice, because in the spring the water ran over the stones and sounded like a woman singing. It was a plain house, 2 rooms and a loft. With a stone chimney I had laid 1 rock at a time and a porch that faced east so I could watch the sun come up over the grasslands. That first night I carried Eliza's carpetbag inside, and I saw her look around at the walls and the plank floor and the single kerosene lamp on the table, and I saw her eyes fill up. She turned her face away so I would not see. It's a fine house, Mr. Hollow. Silas. It's a fine house, Silas. I built the fire. I boiled the coffee. I fried salt pork and mixed cornmeal into a pan of hot grease, and I set a plate in front of her, and I watched her eat like a woman who had not eaten in 3 days, which, as I later learned, she had not. She apologized twice for the way she was eating. I told her there was no one in the house to apologize to except the stove, and the stove did not mind. When the meal was done she washed her plate and mine in the basin, and she stood at the window looking out at the dark, and she said, without turning around, I should tell you why I came. Only if you want to. I don't want to. But you have a right. A man doesn't have rights over a woman's story, ma'am. Only over his own. She turned then, and there was a look on her face I did not know how to read. She reached into the pocket of the gray dress and drew out a folded piece of paper, worn at the creases, brown at the edges. She held it out to me. Read it, she said, and then tell me if you want me to leave in the morning. I took the letter. I unfolded it. I held it toward the lamp. Dearest Eliza, I have thought of nothing but you since the day at the schoolhouse. Come west to me. I have a homestead near the Bighorns, and a bed I have not lain in, and a name I would give you if you would take it. Yours until the mountains fall, J. I read it twice. I looked up at her. Who is J? She sat down at the table across from me. She folded her hands. She said, my husband. The fire cracked. The wind moved along the eaves. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote called, and another answered, and the world went on turning. His name was Jonas Grange, she said. He was a schoolteacher in Missouri. We were married for 4 years. He was a gentle man. He wrote me letters even when we lived in the same house, because he said his tongue could not say what his pen could. 2 years ago he rode west to find land for us. He wrote me every week for 6 months. Then the letters stopped. Then a letter came from a man I had never heard of, a man named Boone Ashley, who said Jonas had died of a fever near the Bighorns, and that his last words had been my name, and that he had left me a homestead and would I please come. And you came. I sold everything I owned. I bought a coach ticket. I arrived in a town called Sweetwater 3 weeks ago, and I asked for Boone Ashley, and no one had heard of him. I asked for Jonas Grange, and no one had heard of him. I asked for the homestead, and there was no homestead. There was only a saloon keeper who offered me work I would not do, and a preacher's wife who gave me bread, and a man who followed me down the boardwalk one night until I ran. She looked at her hands. So I got on another coach, and another, and I spent my last dollar on the coach that put me down in Redemption Falls this afternoon. And I told myself I would not lie to the next man who spoke to me kindly, and I have not lied to you, Silas Hollow. I do not know if my husband is dead. I do not know if the letter in your hand was written by him or by the man who used his name to bring me west. I do not know anything at all except that I am tired, and I am afraid, and I have nothing but this dress. I sat with that for a long time. The fire cracked again. I folded the letter and I set it on the table between us. Eliza. Yes. Do you love him still? This Jonas. She did not answer for a long while. When she did, her voice was very small. I loved the man who wrote those letters. I do not know any more if that man and my husband were the same. I nodded. I stood. I took my coat from the peg by the door. I'll sleep in the barn tonight, I said. You take the bed. Bar the door behind me. In the morning we will talk about what comes next. And no one in this house owes anyone anything they did not choose to give. At the door I stopped and I turned back, and I said the thing I did not know I was going to say. Eliza, if the man who wrote those letters is alive, I will help you find him. And if he is not, I will not ask you to be my wife in anything but name until you tell me you want to be. Do you understand me? She was crying then, quietly, the way a woman cries who has been told not to for a long time. She nodded. She could not speak. I went out. I latched the door from the outside. I walked to the barn under a sky full of hard, cold stars, and I lay down in the straw next to my horse, and I did not sleep. Because I had not told her that in my saddlebag, folded inside my Bible, I carried a letter of my own. A letter I had received 4 months earlier from a man named Boone Ashley, offering to sell me a wife. The next morning I woke before the sun, the way I have every morning of my life, and I walked out to the well and I drew a bucket of water and I washed my face in the cold of it. When I turned toward the house I saw smoke rising from the chimney, and I saw the door standing open, and I saw Eliza on the porch in the gray dress with a cup of coffee in her hands, and she was watching the light come up over the grass the way a woman watches something she has never seen before. You made coffee, I said. I hope that was not a liberty. Ma'am, this is your house too. For as long as you want it to be. She looked down into the cup. I don't know what I want yet, Silas. Then take your time. I sat on the step below her and I drank the coffee she poured me, and neither of us spoke for a long time, and the sun came up and the frost went off the grass, and somewhere down by the creek a meadowlark started to sing. The days that followed were the days I will remember when I am an old man dying, if the good Lord grants me an old man's ending. She learned the house. She learned the stove. She learned which floorboard creaked and which door stuck in the damp. I taught her to milk the cow, whose name was Patience, and Patience did not much care for her at first, and then Patience decided she cared for her more than she cared for me, which I did not take personally. I taught her the names of the horses. She named a new colt Halcyon, because she said it was a word that meant a peaceful time between storms, and I did not tell her I had never heard the word before, because I did not want her to stop using words like that in my house. She would not sleep in the bed unless I slept in the barn. I slept in the barn. On the 4th night she came out to the barn with a lantern, and she stood in the doorway and she said, Silas, it is going to snow tonight and this is your house and you are going to freeze. I have blankets. Ma'am, you will sleep in the loft. I will sleep in the bed. The loft is inside the house. You will not freeze, and I will not have your death on my conscience. I slept in the loft. On the 6th night, when a wind came down out of the north and shook the house on its foundations, she called up the ladder in a voice so soft I almost did not hear it. Silas. Yes, ma'am. Are you cold? No, ma'am. Would you tell me if you were? No, ma'am. I heard her laugh then, for the first time. It was a small laugh, half a breath, but it was a laugh, and I lay in the dark of the loft and I smiled at the rafters like a fool. On the 9th day, Sheriff Cadale Vane rode up to the house. I saw him coming from the ridge, and I set down the fence rail I was mending, and I walked to the porch and I stood on it. Eliza was inside kneading bread. I did not call her out. Vane reined up in the yard. He did not dismount. Silas, Cadale, that woman of yours. My wife, you mean? His smile went thin. Your wife. There's been a man in town a-skin after her. Come in on the eastbound stage last night. Tall fella. Scar down his jaw. Says his name is Boone Ashley. I did not move. I did not blink. I hope I did not anyway. He says, Vane went on, that the woman you married is not free to marry. He says she has a husband livin' in a cabin over near the Sweetwater, and that husband has been laid up sick and sent him to fetch her home. He has papers, Silas. A marriage record. From Missouri. He can have papers written up in any print shop between here and St. Louis. He can. But the law is the law, and if that woman is another man's wife, then what you did in the church 9 nights ago is not a marriage. It's a crime. For her and for you both. I looked at him for a long time. Where is he, Cadale? Halloran's. Waitin' on your answer. My answer? He'd like to meet with you. And her. Tomorrow noon. At the church. He says he wants no trouble. He says he wants only to take his wife home. And if she doesn't want to go? Vane's smile came back. Silas, you know what the law says a woman wants. He tipped his hat. He turned his horse. He rode away. I stood on the porch until his dust was gone. Then I went inside. Eliza was still kneading bread. She looked up at me, and she saw my face, and the color went out of hers. Silas, what is it? I told her. She did not cry. She did not sit down. She stood at the table with her hands white with flour, and she looked past me toward the window, and she said, in a voice like a woman speaking from the far side of a river, he is alive, then. We don't know that yet. Silas, if a man has ridden all the way from the Sweetwater with papers, then either he is my husband, or he is a man who wishes to become my husband whether I will it or not. Either way, he is alive, and either way, I am not free. I crossed the room. I stopped a step away from her. I did not touch her. I have never in my life put my hand on a woman without her leave, and I was not going to begin then. Eliza, look at me. She looked at me. Tomorrow noon we will ride into town together. We will meet this man. If he is your husband, if he is the Jonas Grange who wrote you those letters, I will step aside, and I will help you go home to him, and I will not say one word against it. Do you hear me? Yes. But if he is not, if he is Boone Ashley, and if he has come to take you against your will, then I will stand between you and him until one of us is in the ground. Do you hear that also? She was crying then, without sound, the way I had seen her cry the first night. She reached up with a floured hand and she touched my jaw, and she left a print of flour there, and she said, Silas Hollow, I do not deserve you. Ma'am, I said, I have thought the same about you every hour of 9 days. On the frontier, kindness was rarer than rain, and worth more than a man's whole herd. That night I did not sleep in the loft. I sat in the chair by the fire with my rifle across my knees, and I watched the door until the sky went pale, and Eliza slept in the bed for the first time, knowing that she was not alone in the house, and I do not know if she slept well, but she slept. Before we rode out the next morning, I went to my saddlebag and I took my Bible out and I opened it to the middle and I drew out the letter I had never told her about. I read it one more time. Mr. Hollow, I am given to understand you are a man in want of a wife and unwilling to advertise. I am in possession of a young woman, recently widowed, biddable, of Christian upbringing and fair countenance, whom I can deliver to Redemption Falls for the sum of $100, half on agreement, half on delivery. She will not know the arrangement. She believes she is coming west to a homestead of her own. If this is agreeable, respond to this address by return post. B. Ashley. I had not answered the letter. I had burned the address. I had told myself I had done nothing wrong, because I had not paid the money, and I had not consented, and I had not known who the woman was. But I had known such a woman existed, and I had said nothing to anyone. And when a woman in a gray dress had stepped down from a stagecoach in Redemption Falls saying she had come west to find a homestead that did not exist, I had known in my bones who had put her on that coach. I folded the letter. I put it in the inside pocket of my coat. And I saddled the horses. We rode into Redemption Falls under a sky the color of old tin. The wind smelled of snow that had not yet fallen. The main street was quieter than I had ever seen it, and I did not take that for a good sign. There were faces in the windows of the mercantile. There were faces on the porch of the boarding house. There was Sheriff Vane leaning against a post in front of the church with a toothpick in his teeth and a smile on his mouth. And on the church steps stood a tall man in a long black coat with a scar that ran from his ear to the corner of his jaw. He held his hat in his hand. His hair was the color of wet straw. His eyes, when they found Eliza, went bright the way a knife goes bright when it turns in the sun. I helped Eliza down from her horse. She stood in the street a moment. She looked at the man on the steps. Her hand went to the curl by her ear, and it stayed there. "That is not Jonas," she said. I heard her say it. I heard it as clear as a bell. I put my hand on the small of her back, and I walked her toward the steps. The tall man came down 2 steps to meet us. He did not offer his hand. "Eliza," he said, in a voice like warm honey. "My poor girl, you've had us worried sick. Us, your husband and me. Jonas has been laid up with the lung fever for 9 weeks. He sent me to fetch you home the moment he was well enough to hold a pen and write your name. May I see the letter?" He reached inside his coat. He drew out a folded paper. He handed it to her. She unfolded it. She read it. I watched her face. "This is not his hand," she said. "He is weak, Eliza. He could not. This is not his hand. And you are not a man who was ever known to my husband. And I do not know you, sir. Boone Ashley, for that is who he was." There was no doubt of it in my mind, and there was none in hers. Smiled at her the way a man smiles at a child who has said something charmingly wrong. "Mum." "Sheriff, I have here a certified copy of a marriage record from the county of Greene, in the state of Missouri, dated April of 1875, uniting one Jonas Grange and one Eliza Whitfield in holy matrimony." He held the paper aloft. "I have here an affidavit, signed by Mr. Grange himself and witnessed by 2 neighbors, appointing me his agent to recover his lawful wife from Wyoming territory. I have every legal right to take this woman home, and any man who stands in my way is standing in the way of the law." Sheriff Vane's smile broadened. "Silas," he said, "the law is the law." I did not look at Vane. I looked at Boone Ashley, and I reached into the inside pocket of my coat, and I drew out the letter he had written me, and I opened it, and I held it up in the cold gray air where every soul on that street could see it. "Cadell," I said, "would you read this out loud, please?" Vane's smile faltered. He looked at me. He looked at the paper. "Silas, read it, Sheriff, in your capacity as the law. Read it loud enough for the ladies on the porch of the boarding house to hear." He came down off the boardwalk. He took the letter. He read it. He read the first line, and his voice was strong. He read the second line, and his voice was weaker. He read the words $100 and biddable, and she will not know the arrangement, and by the time he got to the signature at the bottom his voice was so quiet a child could have swallowed it. The street was very still. Boone Ashley's face had gone the color of ash. His hand moved toward the inside of his coat, and I heard the small sound of a hammer being drawn back on a pistol, and I turned my body slightly so that Eliza was behind me. "I would not, sir," I said. He did not. Sheriff Vane stood in the street holding the letter. He looked at me. He looked at Ashley. He looked at the letter again. And I watched a thing happen in Cadell Vane's face that I had not thought possible. I watched him decide, for once in his long crooked life, to be the law he had sworn to be, because the eyes of the whole town were on him, and because a lie had been read out in his own voice, and because a man does not always choose the right, but sometimes the right chooses him. "Boone Ashley," he said, and his voice was the voice of a sheriff, "I am placing you under arrest on suspicion of fraud, forgery, and traffic in a human person, pending investigation and communication with the county of Greene, in the state of Missouri, as to the true condition of one Jonas Grange." Ashley moved. I do not remember drawing. I remember only that my rifle was in my hands and the barrel was on his chest, and his own pistol was halfway out of his coat, and Vane's revolver was against the back of his neck, and for one long second the three of us stood there in the street like figures cut out of paper. Then Ashley let his pistol fall. It struck the boards. He raised his hands. Vane took him by the collar. He walked him to the jail. Eliza was still standing behind me. I did not turn. Could not yet. Silas. Yes. Why did you have that letter? I closed my eyes. Because a man wrote it to me 4 months ago, and I did not answer him, but I did not turn him in either. I told myself I had done nothing. But I had done nothing, and nothing is what allowed a woman to be put on a coach and sent west to a homestead that did not exist. If you can never forgive me for that, Eliza, I will understand it, and I will not ask you to stay. There was a long silence. Long enough that I heard the wind in the eaves of the mercantile. Long enough that I heard a horse stamp somewhere down the street. Then I felt her hand on my sleeve. Silas Hollow, she said. Look at me. I turned. Her eyes were wet, but they were steady. She reached up, and she tucked the stray curl behind her ear, and she left her hand there against her cheek a moment as if she were making up her mind, and then she lowered it and she took my hand in both of hers. You did not answer the letter. No. You did not pay the money. No. And when a stranger stepped off a stagecoach in a gray dress, you did not turn away. You crossed the street, and you took your hat off, and you offered her your name so a wicked man could not have her. Eliza, you are not the man who wrote that letter, Silas. You are the man who read it out loud. I could not speak. She stepped in close to me, there in the middle of the main street of Redemption Falls, in the sight of every soul in that town, and she laid her forehead against my chest, and she said, so quietly only the good Lord and I could hear it, take me home. We wrote to Missouri that afternoon. It took 11 weeks to get an answer. In the meantime, Boone Ashley sat in Cadale Vane's jail, and Cadale Vane became, to the astonishment of every soul in Redemption Falls including himself, a fair and reasonable sheriff, at least for the length of that winter, which is longer than most men manage. In the meantime, the snow came, and it came hard, and Eliza and I lived in the house on the rise above Little Voice Creek, and we learned each other's silences. She began to sing while she worked. She had not known she remembered how. She sang hymns mostly, and one old Missouri song her mother had taught her about a girl who waited by a river for a boy who did not come, and every time she sang it I thought of Ruth and Miller, and I did not mind. I told Eliza about Ruth and one night by the fire. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I was done she said, Silas, I think Ruth and sent me to you. You do? I think she has been waiting 15 years to send a woman to your door who needed a good man more than she needed a young one. And I think when she found me on that coach she said, him. That one. He will do. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in a long time. Surprised us both. The letter came in the first week of February. It was written in a woman's hand, but the woman had signed her husband's name below her own. Jonas Grange, it seemed, had died of the lung fever in a boarding house in Independence, Missouri, in the winter of 1877, 2 years before Eliza had ever received a letter claiming to be from him. His landlady had buried him and kept his few papers, and it was from those papers that Boone Ashley, who had lodged in the same house, had learned enough of Eliza's name and history to forge 2 years of letters, sell her his invented homestead, and put her on a coach west with instructions to deliver her to a lonely rancher he had chosen from a list of subscribers to a Kansas City almanac. Eliza read the letter twice. She folded it. She put it in the stove. She turned to me. She said, I am free, Silas. You are. And I do not want to be. She crossed the room. She stopped in front of me. She reached up with both hands, and she took my face between them, and she said, Silas Hollow, I have been your wife on a piece of paper for 4 months. I would like, if you will have me, to be your wife in this house and in this bed and in this life until the good Lord comes for one of us. Not because I have nothing but this dress, but because you are the only man who ever looked at me in that dress and did not see nothing. I could not speak. I did not have to. I have been told my hands are honest hands, and I put them where they belonged, and she put her forehead against mine, and we stood like that for a long time in the middle of the room while the fire cracked in the stove and the snow came down soft on the roof of the house I had built for a woman who never came, and had come at last. I will not tell you what came after that because it is not for telling. I will only say that in the morning she was singing again, and that the song was a new one, and that I did not know the words but I knew the tune, because it was the tune a meadowlark sings when the frost goes off the grass and the sun comes up over the bighorns, and a man who thought the good Lord had forgotten him finds out he was only being kept. On the frontier, a woman was sometimes given nothing but a dress and a name, and told to make a life of them. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, a man was given the sense the good Lord gave a fence post and told to cross a street. And when those two things happened on the same afternoon in the same town, it was called, by those who knew, a marriage. And by those who knew better, a mercy. We buried Boone Ashley's schemes in the county court that spring. We buried Ruth and Miller's headstone in my memory that summer, when Eliza and I rode east together and stood in the little churchyard in Ohio where I had left her, and Eliza laid a bunch of prairie sage on the grave and said, "Thank you, Ruth Ann. I will take good care of him." We buried the gray dress in a cedar chest at the foot of our bed, because Eliza said she would not wear it again, but she would not throw it away either. "It is the dress I had nothing in," she said, "and it is the dress I had you in. Can rest now." Sheriff Cadale Vane was elected to a second term that November, on a platform of law and order and the reading aloud of letters. He surprised everyone by earning it. The colt named Halcyon grew into a good horse. Patience the cow lived to a great old age and died in the pasture with her calf beside her. Preacher Ames married 4 more couples in the church at Redemption Falls before he passed, and he said at each wedding, when he came to the part about for better or for worse, that he had once married a man and a woman who had nothing but a dress between them, and it had turned out to be enough and more than enough, and if any couple present that day had at least as much as a dress, they were rich people and they had better remember it. I remember it. I am an old man now, or old enough. Eliza's hair has gone the color of river stone in shallow water, which is fitting, because her eyes were that color the day I met her, and now the rest of her has caught up. We sit on the porch some evenings, when the meadowlarks are singing down by Little Voice Creek, and I take her hand, and I do not have to say anything, because we have said everything already, 40 years of it, and we have said it well. Sometimes, on those evenings, she leans her head against my shoulder, and she says the same thing she said in the church that first night, in a voice so quiet only the good Lord and I can hear it. "I have nothing but this dress." And I say what I said then, because it was true then, and it is true now, and it will be true when they lay us both down beside Ruth and Miller in the little Ohio churchyard where all of this began. Then wear it down the aisle tonight. And she smiles. And the sun goes down over the bighorns. And the good Lord, who I had once believed had forgotten where he put me, turns out to have known exactly where I was all along. He was only waiting for a woman in a gray dress to step down off a stagecoach, and for a man with honest hands to cross a street.